Hi, this is Dan Sullivan. I'd like to welcome you to the Multiplier Mindset Podcast. When I was 70 years old, I told my entire team, my entire company, that when I was 95, I was going to be doing a strategic coach workshop, and this would be in 2039, and it would be a much better workshop. So people ask me, we don't know anybody who gets better and keeps doing something until they're 95. And I said, well, it's very interesting because I have an advantage, and that is that I had a father who was a farmer for most of his life, and then after 60, he was a landscaper, which is hard physical labor. Both farming and landscaping is hard physical labor, and he had his best year when he was 83 years old, and then unfortunately decided to retire, and he died within 12 months after retiring, and he didn't have to retire. I had the opportunity on 3 or 4 occasions when I would visit home. This is Northern Ohio, small town, Northern Ohio. I would say, Dad, I'd just like to go around and see your jobs, what you're doing. And I learned a secret about my father and why he was able to work for so long and be motivated. And when he was in his 70s and 80s, I would go around and meet all his clients, and virtually all of them were widows because their husbands had died. And one of the reasons my father was hired, because to a certain extent he was fulfilling some of the role of their husband, who used to take care of the lawn and used to be a landscaping. I mean, landscaping wasn't as big a deal back in the 1970s and 80s as it is in the 21st century. So I noticed that, he put in 10-hour days, but maybe he would work hard for 5 of the hours. And the rest of the time, he was building his confidence, and he had a very neat trick. So picture this. He's in his early 80s, and he's about 5'6", maybe weighed 150 pounds. He could pick up a 100-pound tree, carry it across the lawn, and drop it into a hole. And he'd do that 5 or 6 times in about a 20-minute period. This had an incredible impact on his customers. This physical capability that he had at 80 years old was just a knockout. So they're all women. He didn't have any men clients. So my father had all these other women in his life, and they say, oh, Mr. Sullivan, I baked your favorite cookies, come on in. Oh, this is your son. Your father is an amazing man. They say, Dan, oh, your father is so I tell all my friends about your father. You're the most remarkable man that I've ever met. I wish my husband had been like you, So my father was getting this amazing applause all day. So his workday had 2 parts of it. He had really, really hard work, which was a show to really, really impress his audience. And then he got all this applause, and he got coffee and cookies. And then he got all these referrals because everyone wanted to tell them about their landscaper who was an 80-year-old Superman. So the interesting thing about it, I said, unfortunately, he decided to retire at age 83, and he died for physical reasons. He died of prostate cancer. When he retired, he had a complete physical, and he didn't have cancer, but in the next 6 months, he developed cancer, and he died just about a year later. I've thought about it often because he didn't have a physical reason to retire. He was still strong, and he could still work. He did something which I think ends a lot of people's lives, especially entrepreneurs, and that is he gave up his audience. The day after the clapping stopped, my father wasn't a hero anymore. And my father really didn't know who he was because his whole life was using that amazing physical strength to put on a great performance and then get massive amounts of applause for it. And he was a hero. He was a hero in the lives of all these women. He was a topic of discussion in all their networks about Mr. Sullivan, this amazing 80-year-old man who could do this when all their husbands had died 15 years previously. And there was a very famous general agent in the life insurance business that I knew, an icon. He's one of the greatest general managers of all time. His name was Al Granum from Northwestern Mutual. They had mandatory retirement, but when Al was in his 80s, he was giving 60 speeches a year. He was going all around. I was talking to him one night about the reaction on the part of other people to the fact that in his 80s he was still working a very, very busy schedule of speeches, and he was an honored guest. He was a titan. He was a giant in the life insurance business, and he said that people would say, Al, you got this place in Florida, it's on a lake, it's got fish, you like fishing. Why are you doing this? And he said, yeah, he says, I like fishing, but he says, something I've noticed about fishing, fish don't clap. And I was immediately reminded of why Al lived so long, and I was immediately reminded why my father probably lived 10 years, 15 years, working very hard, having his greatest business success, and it was because of the clapping. He was a hero. So I want to tell you that as an entrepreneur, remember when you retire, the clapping stops. You're not a hero anymore, and you'll find out that an enormous amount of your motivation, enormous amount of your performance came from the audience that spurred you on to put on the best possible performance, to be a hero to them, and they also clapped, and that's what kept you going. So people say, are you ever going to stop coaching? And I said, the night I die on stage is when I stop working. But I said, I'm working right till the end.